The city streets shimmered under the soft glow of flickering streetlights, rain pooling in the cracks of the pavement. Keanu Reeves stood beside a police car, his clothes damp from the constant drizzle. Water clung to the strands of his long hair, sending slow droplets rolling down his face. But he didn't move to wipe them away. The silver cross around his neck caught the glow of the neon lights overhead, a small glint of light in the wet darkness. Around him, the officers laughed, loud, unrestrained, their voices bouncing off the empty streets. One of them doubled over, slapping another on the back. "Look at this guy, still clinging to that?" the officer jeered, pointing at the crucifix. His amusement was shared, the others shaking their heads in disbelief. Keanu didn't respond. He didn't fight. He didn't flinch. His fingers, steady and calm, wrapped around the cross, gripping it gently. The cold metal pressed into his palm, grounding him, steadying him. His eyes remained downcast, his face unreadable. Yet behind the silence, there was something deeper. A quiet pain. A sorrow that ran too deep for words. The laughter continued, rising and falling with the rhythm of the rain. The officers, emboldened by his lack of reaction, exchanged more jabs, their smug satisfaction thick in the cold night air. The rain fell harder. The city breathed, neon signs flickering in the distance. The wind carried the distant hum of sirens, the occasional screech of tires. And Keanu remained still, his grip on the crucifix unwavering, as if holding on to something they could never take from him. The rain came down harder, drumming against the pavement, tapping against the police car beside him. The officers' laughter echoed, filling the empty street with cruel amusement. Their faces were flushed with self-satisfaction, their eyes gleaming under the streetlights. Keanu stood unmoving, his fingers wrapped around the crucifix, the cold metal pressing into his palm. He let the moment stretch, let their laughter rise and fall like waves against a shore. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze. The laughter faltered, just slightly. His eyes, dark and heavy with something unspoken, met theirs, not with defiance, not with anger, but with something else. Something deeper. The officer closest to him shifted, clearing his throat as if suddenly aware of the cold. The drizzle soaked through their uniforms, their breath visible in the chilled night air. The neon lights buzzed above, casting flickering shadows across the wet pavement. A distant thunder rumbled through the sky. Then, something else. A sound, faint, almost imperceptible beneath the rain. A low hum, a whisper against the edge of hearing, the kind of sound that didn't belong. Keanu's fingers tightened slightly around the cross. The officers didn't seem to notice. They resumed their jeering, but their laughter was quieter now, less certain. One of them rubbed his arms, shivering. Another glanced over his shoulder, his expression suddenly wary, as if sensing something just out of sight. The wind shifted. The rain carried a scent with it, metallic, sharp. Keanu exhaled, slowly lowering his eyes again. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be out here." The words cut through the damp air, quiet but heavy. The officer in front of him scoffed. "Oh yeah? And why's that?" Keanu didn't answer. He only let his grip on the crucifix tighten, his breath steady. Because he knew. They weren't alone anymore. The wind howled through the alleyways, carrying the scent of rain and something else. Something bitter, metallic. The city's usual noise, the distant honking of cars, the murmur of life behind closed doors, had faded. The streets had grown too quiet. Keanu stood motionless, his fingers wrapped around the silver cross. The laughter of the officers had died down, their voices tapering into uneasy silence. They could feel it now. The shift in the air. The weight of something unseen pressing down on them. One officer, the one who had mocked him the loudest, cleared his throat and forced a chuckle. "Oh, come on," he muttered, shoving his hands into his pockets. "You trying to scare us or something?" Keanu didn't answer. His gaze dropped slightly, his breath steady, his grip on the crucifix tightening. Then the streetlight above them flickered. A single flash. Then another. Darkness. The laughter was gone. The rain fell in a steady rhythm, but the world around them felt still, as if holding its breath. The officers shifted uncomfortably, their confidence unraveling at the edges. A low sound echoed through the street. Not thunder, not the wind. A hum. Deep. Vibrating. Wrong. One officer instinctively reached for his holster, his fingers brushing the grip of his weapon. "Who's there?" He barked, his voice sharper than he intended. The others turned, their eyes scanning the darkened street, their breath coming in short, visible bursts in the cold air. Keanu remained still, then footsteps, soft, measured, coming from just beyond the glow of the nearest flickering sign. A figure stood there, barely visible in the shifting light, tall, motionless, watching. The officer closest to the car swore under his breath. "This some kind of joke?" he muttered, stepping forward. "Hey, you lost or something?" No response. The rain kept falling. The figure didn't move. Then all at once, the streetlights buzzed back to life, casting their glow over the figure's face. Except there was no face at all, only darkness. A void where features should have been. The officer took a sharp step back, his breath catching in his throat. Jesus Christ! Keanu finally lifted his head. His voice was quiet, steady. "I told you." The streetlights flickered again, the hum grew louder, and the darkness moved. The darkness didn't just exist, it breathed. It twisted and coiled, stretching unnaturally from the faceless figure, tendrils of shadow slithering across the wet pavement. The air grew heavier, suffocating as if the city itself was being swallowed. The officers scrambled, their bravado shattered. One of them fumbled for his radio, his fingers trembling as he pressed the button. "Dispatch," his voice cracked. "We somethings." Static, no response. Then the streetlights blew out completely. Darkness fell over them like a tidal wave. The city vanished. The rain still poured, but the world around them was gone, swallowed into an abyss of pure black. The laughter from before, the jeering, the mocking, was nothing but a distant memory now. A whisper echoed, soft, almost gentle. Then another, then 100, overlapping, crawling into their ears like insects burrowing beneath the skin. One of the officers gasped, a choked, strangled sound. The others turned toward him, barely able to see in the consuming dark. He was standing stiff, his body rigid, his hands clawing at his throat. His mouth opened, but no words came, only the whispering now pouring from him. Keanu didn't move, he simply exhaled. "You were warned." Another officer turned, his breath ragged. "What the hell is this?" He grabbed Keanu's arm, shaking him. "What's happening?" Keanu's gaze remained steady. Judgment. Then the void moved. A rush of black engulfed them, and the screaming began. It wasn't the kind of screaming that came from pain or fear. It was the sound of something being erased. One by one, the officers disappeared, their voices swallowed mid-breath. Their bodies twisted, dissolving into the darkness like ink washing away in the rain. Keanu stood still. The shadow loomed over him, towering, reaching. He lifted his crucifix, the silver glinting weakly in the remaining shards of light. For a moment, just a moment, the darkness hesitated. Then, silence. The rain still fell, the city still stood. The streetlights flickered back to life, their dim glow reflecting off the wet pavement. The police car was there, its doors wide open. But the officers? Gone. No trace of them remained. No bodies, no footprints, no signs they had ever stood there at all. Only their laughter, still echoing faintly in the wind, as if the night itself remembered what they had done. Keanu lowered the crucifix, his fingers releasing their grip. He took a slow breath, letting it all settle. Then, without a word, he turned and walked into the rain, disappearing into the neon-lit city. The darkness did not follow. Not this time.